Greetings, book lovers everywhere, and welcome back to Eat Train Talks. I'm a 12-year literacy advocate, podcast host, and booktuber, and I hope you'll find yourself learning new facts and figures and escaping into magical book adventures today. And now, it's time to talk with someone amazing. And today, my guest author has a number of books sitting on my bookshelf. And the funny thing is, I didn't even realize how many of his books I'd read until after I'd asked to interview him about his great story, Fallout. I spent many years diving into only nonfiction reads before I even thought of fiction, and some of the most entertaining historical nonfiction books I'd read were by the author sitting virtually across from me today. From nonfiction to graphic novels like the Rabbi Harvey series, and a lot more, I'm so honored to introduce my guest, three-time National Book Award finalist, an Edwards Award winner, and a Newbery honor, to name just a few awards he's received. Issues that matter and Matt's heard. And not just educates, but entertains too. I'm talking about the one and only author, a true writing legend, and a personal hero of mine, Steve Sheinkin.
Hey, thank you. What a build-up. Thank you, Mr. E. I appreciate it. And I'm a fan of yours too. I love what you've been doing.
Oh, thank you so much. And I love both what you're doing when it comes to books, and also, leading into my first question, you're the creator and co-host of the legendary Author Fan Face-Off series, where middle grade authors face off in a trivia competition about their own book versus kid readers. And I was actually lucky enough to battle against author A.S. King on a recent episode, which ended up being a fantastic highlight of 2022. And I'm sure everyone watching, including myself, is curious to know how you came up with the idea to start Author Fan Face Off in the first place. And what was the process to get the show up and running?
Yeah, thank you again for doing it. That was our first episode of this year, which is our third third season that we've done. And which is surprising to us, to Stacy Ratner and I. She's a school librarian, one of those super librarians that you meet everywhere you go, at conferences, and I just love working with her. And it was totally pandemic related in terms of the birth of it, because 2020, everything shut down. Schools, my own kids are stuck at home, and authors were scrambling to think of something to do. Do I read books aloud? Do I do something that will be useful to classes and teachers and kids? And so I just wanted to go one step further than that and create something that could hopefully be fun, but also promote the same thing you're trying to do, get people reading, talk about how great books are, introduce them to new authors. And the one asset I have in this world, the book world is pretty small, and I've been around for a while, so I know a lot of people. I know a lot of authors, and I felt I could reach out to lots of famous authors and ask them to do it. And they might say no, I thought. It turns out nobody said no.
Wow.
We've done something like 80 episodes, and it's amazing. You'll be amazed, at the level of authors who have agreed to do it. And so, yeah, it's just what you said, an author, a fan, they're right on screen like we are now, and we ask questions from one of their famous books. And so it's totally unscripted. We never know who's going to win. I would say that it's probably been half and half, authors and fans winning. Sometimes the fans are so obsessed they'll read a book 100 times, and then the author won't have read it in 10 years. You had a disadvantage when you were up against Amy, where that was her really new book. So she knew it. She had it all really fresh in her head. Sometimes we'll do a book with an author wrote 15 years ago, and they just get crushed. But that's all part of the fun too.
Yeah. Well, I really love Author Fan Face Off, and if any of you listening haven't seen it, it's awesome. And they have everybody from Catherine Applegate on there, who wrote the one and only Ivan, to Stuart Gibbs, to Chris Gravenstein, and now a lot of brand new authors who are and also not brand new authors with brand new books. Just so many awesome people, and yeah, you'll also get a lot of book recommendations. My to-be-read pile is just piling up right now from Author Fan Face Off.
Yeah, it's good for that, yeah. Yeah, they're all posted on YouTube, so they're easy to find.
And they also have a great outro, Author Fan Face Off.
Yeah, that's my niece, so my brother's very talented daughter, Alex, who writes really serious songs too. But I said, "Can you please do it?" And in 10 seconds, she just recorded that into her phone and said, "Here, take that."
Well, it certainly is a great way to end a great show. And while preparing for our chat, I read that you once wrote for an educational publishing company. I was like, whoa, this guy's really interesting. And you actually started with editing, and once the editors realized you were a talented writer, you were hired on as a full-time writer. And were you a history fan even before working in educational publishing? And I also read that since you wrote history textbooks, which is also like, wow, what was it that compelled you to take the leap from writing history textbooks to writing your own middle grade entertaining nonfiction?
Yeah, that's a big question, but it all basically I could cover the first half of my life just in that question alone because yeah, I always liked history, but I didn't know it. So I loved reading historical fiction because I just thought, well, a pirate story, a Wild West story. Of course, I'm gonna love these adventure, mystery, thriller type stories. And they were all based on research, on the kind of thing that I do now for a living. But I didn't know that. I just thought they were great stories set in different times and places. So yeah, I was attracted to history. But then again, when it came to the sort of thing we did in school, for me, it was not so much. It was memorizing names and dates, which explorer, went to which river and what year. Who can remember stuff like that? Who cares, really?
Yeah.
And, you remember it long enough to put it on the test and then you forget it. And so, no, I didn't think I liked history. And then fast forward many years, I really wanted to be a writer and I tried a lot of different things. I'm sure we'll talk about comics and movies and all that stuff. And I did get this job writing for a textbook company, which was kind of a joke because now am I going to be the one writing those boring sections about an explorer sailing on the Mississippi River in 15 whatever? And I didn't want to be. So I really tried very hard to put in what I thought were funny, surprising, gross, mysterious, complicated, compelling parts of the story, the stuff that gets left out of the boring history books. And they would never let me put it in. And now I'm summarizing 10 years in 1 minute, but I tried over and over again to put that kind of stuff in. And they never would let me. And so I just got so frustrated. I really had to that point hadn't thought about I'm going to be a nonfiction writer. I just hadn't thought about that until I started collecting so many stories that I just couldn't help it. I just said, I can't just leave this stuff in a drawer for any longer. I have to try and write these books myself.
I'm just curious, what techniques do you do now to generate and store writing inspirations?
So even physically, like writing things down, where to keep it, I'm still pretty old-fashioned 20th century. It's not a coincidence that I could reach out my hand and touch 4 or 5 different notebooks, with this is just your classic composition book, but if I have ideas, I still find this is the quickest way for me to write them down, and I could put in little drawings or sketches or whatever. And that goes for index cards. There's always tons of these cards lying around my office where I'm jotting down things. When I actually get to writing, well, even before that, when I'm researching, all right, I know I want to research this particular story, let's say this particular spy story, whatever it is. Then I'll as I'm reading, I'll usually type up my notes into just a simple Word file because I find then that it's just easier to search. That file can get really big. It could get to be a couple hundred pages, but it's much easier to search than the old notebook. And so it's a combination of everything, but eventually everything winds up, hopefully, in one digital file, one file that I can then access from any different computer and search and cut and paste things from if there are certain quotes I know I want to use. So it's still a combination of old-fashioned handwriting and computer, but not the most sophisticated way to do it. I mean, there are writers who use these programs that they're constantly telling me about, oh, this will organize it for you and help you. And I don't feel I need it. It just sounds like more complicated than it's worth.
It does. Old fashioned is the best kind of fashion.
Yeah, that's good to hear you say that.
And speaking of all the cutting and pasting, you have a bomb graphic novel coming out on January 24th, which I cannot wait to read. And I'm just really curious, what's the process like when, because you're doing the drawing, you have your own artist, and Is there like information for that you would leave out from a graphic novel manuscript compared to a non-picture novel
Yeah,
script?
that's a very smart question. And yeah, again, I happen to have one right here. This will
Ooh,
be out depending on when you're watching it. It may be out already, but January 24th, I think. And it's just awesome. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I wrote it. I mean the art. It's Nick Bertozzi's art, 250 pages of full-blown, really cinematic science, spying, action scenes. And yeah, so we had this book, or I had this book, Bomb, which came out almost 10 years ago now. And the science and spying going on during the Manhattan Project in World War II, the attempt, the race to build the first atomic bomb. And yeah, to adapt that to a script, it's very much like, well, comics are very much like movies, and writing for comics is very much like writing a screenplay for a television or a film. And because you just picture it, I mean, the panel is like the screen, and you're seeing something like I'm seeing you. I could put a word bubble right next to your head, and that would be a comic. And that's essentially what writing a script is panel one, we see this, and you're saying this. Panel two, you see me, and I'm saying this. And but the trick is, and everyone will know this intuitively because you've read a book, let's say, and then seen the movie version of it. And you probably have told yourself, first of all, the book was better because it's almost always is. Not always, but almost. And also, they left out half the stuff or more than that. They left out all these great things because you just have to. You can't fit a 250-page book into a 2-hour movie. So, and that was essentially what we were trying to do here in Bomb. They gave me 250 pages, which was generous to write. When you're writing a script, the general rule of thumb is 1 page equals 1 minute of screen time. So this is a really long movie,
yeah.
but still I had to cut out half the story. If you read the narrative nonfiction Bomb and then read the graphic novel, you'll see what I mean. I mean, it's really concentrated. And so I didn't just do a straight adaptation. I had to take what I thought were the key storylines and key scenes and then kind of rearrange and refine them into what felt more like the pacing of a film.
That is really interesting. And speaking of screenplays, I know that you have some experience in dabbling in that sort of field. So, after your brother Ari graduated college, you and him moved together, and you, well, you worked on screenplays
That's
for
right.
little short films, and that I found that like really interesting, from historical comedies and like from the Civil War times. It was just you're a really interesting guy. There's a lot of stuff to your backstory
That's
that I
nice of
just
you to
had to ask
say.
about.
That's nice of you to say. It may also just be that I had a lot of time to try lots of different things,
Yeah.
which I highly recommend. But yeah, you've done your homework. So yeah, after college, I moved to DC. I'm almost 3 years older than my brother Ari, but we grew up writing together, and that was our main thing. We said we're going to be filmmakers together, and we used to write comedy sketches and we videotaped them. Now we're going way back. And have you ever even seen a VHS tape? Do you know what I mean? Videotape.
I have. I watched like some adaptations on TV about like the 80s.
Yeah,
Like
right.
they talk about a like there's one the Goldbergs, it's like a family from the 80s, so like I learned some of these 80s terms that none of my friends really know.
That's right. Most people wouldn't know. But yeah, we're talking about the 80s. So we videotaped these, like comedy routines, little comedy sketches that and we were mostly writers. We were not good actors. He's a little better than I am, but we're both pretty bad. So I thought, oh, it would be really fun to dig those out and show them at schools when I give talks at schools, mostly at middle schools, and that can be a tough audience.
Yeah.
So let me embarrass myself and win them over, break the ice. And but then I watched them and I said, that's going too far. They're too embarrassing. And
There's even a point for
yeah,
adults where it gets too embarrassing.
exactly. The acting is just too bad. The writing is pretty funny in places. And we sort of sensed that. We said we're going to be writers. So yeah, going ahead now into the 90s now, when he graduated from college, we moved together to Austin, Texas, and because that was a really hotbed of independent film. And so let's just live as cheaply as we can and write some screenplays and try to make a movie. And that little section of my life ended with us we actually did make a film, a feature
Wow.
film called A More Perfect Union. It was a political satire comedy. And we finished the whole thing, an hour and a half movie on a really shoestring budget. And you could go to YouTube later and look it up and you'll see a trailer. And hopefully you'll see that there's a good idea there, along with lots of rookie mistakes. We didn't actually know how to make a movie. We had good acting, good music. Some of the film work the cinematography is quite good. And, there are good elements of it. Some of the jokes work, some don't. Just what you'd expect as you're trying your first movie. It was not super well received. In fact, this I do show at my talks. I show the first review it ever got in this newspaper called the Austin Chronicle,
Oh boy.
which is where people go to get their, what movie should we see? That, the arts news for the city. And it was terrible. I mean, unfortunately, I can't make it disappear from the internet so anyone can find it. It was 1 star. It had one sad little star on the bottom out of 5. And it was but it wasn't even that good. It was so insulting and mean. And I actually like to show that because that's going to happen to you in some form.
Mhm.
And of course, unfortunately, now we're giving each other stars on every 2 seconds on social media, which is ridiculous. But it's going to happen if you put yourself out there in any form. You're doing this podcast and people can always react to something and say something negative, and you have to be. It's okay if it hurts. That's natural, but you have to be able to get past it too. And so I do like to show it in schools and say, hey, this was very embarrassing at the time, but it was not the end of the world.
It certainly was not the end of the world for you, and you have done a lot more since then. And I will look up that trailer after this interview because
Yeah, sure.
I really want to check it out. And I love a film where there's some good jokes here and there, kind of like a Thor movie. So
Okay, good.
So I'll definitely check that out. You all should also check it out. And speaking of, really awesome and intriguing things that Steve does and did, I read that last summer you set off on quite a journey. On social media, I saw that you traveled on a 6-day trek from Auschwitz-Birkenau, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, to Slovakia, following the route of 2 Slovak Jews who escaped in 1944 and impossibly made it home and gave the first eyewitness accounts of what was happening in the Nazi camps. That's just so extraordinary. And I had family members who moved to the US to escape the Holocaust. And I had family that didn't escape. So I just found it extremely inspiring and just wow factor that you took that journey. And would you mind sharing what inspired you to take such a meaningful and important trek and talk a bit about the experience?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a change of pace from, making this silly comedy. But I like doing that. I love that aspect of writing that you can switch gears so dramatically. And yeah, so the basic story that I'm telling in this upcoming book, which will be called Impossible Escape, and it'll be out in the fall of this, now I can say this year, 23. It's about these 2 young, I really focus on one of them. He was a teenager when he got sent to Auschwitz, this dreaded Nazi killing center in southern Poland. And from the moment he was captured, he thought only of escaping, which was, as we say in the title, it was impossible. There was no way to get out of this place. And even if you did, you're in Nazi-occupied Poland, and it's going to be impossible to travel. You'll be arrested in 2 seconds as soon as you show your face outside. And so this is the true story of how he did it. And the trek I went on this summer was a recreation of, in a sense, of the march that he and his fellow prisoner and friend took when they got out of the camp. That's one major achievement, which was mind-blowing that they were able to do it, and brilliant how they did it. Once they're out, they were still 50, 60 miles or so from the border of Slovakia, where they were from. Not that they would be safe in Slovakia as Jews, because Nazis controlled almost all of Europe at that point, but they would be safer. They could at least blend in, and they might have some friends they could hide with, as opposed to in Poland. So their objective was to make it to the border. But again, like we said, they can't travel on roads. They can't travel by day at all. They have no money, no food. Their heads are shaved. They have tattoos on their arms from being in this prison. Anything will give them away. They have foreign accents to people in Poland. And so what we did was nothing like obviously what they did, but what we did was over 6 days follow the route. At least we could follow the geography of the route that they took. And even marching during the day on roads and paths, it was intense and exhausting. A lot of it is mostly mountains. And it was just such a powerful experience. I too, like you said, my both branches of my family are Jewish from that part of what was sometimes Poland, sometimes Russia in those days. And so there's that connection too. But just being there, seeing the geography, reading aloud from their accounts, both of the young men who escaped wrote books about it, which was great for us as researchers. It was really unlike anything that I've ever experienced.
Wow. That must have been I guess there's like no words to describe that. The emotions you must have felt, and also the physically it must have been extremely hard and emotionally. You must be so proud of yourself for doing it.
I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
Obviously it was canceled the year before because of COVID, and now, I'm all geared up to do it. And there was a war right next door. They're still going on, obviously, in Ukraine. So it was really unclear if it was even going to happen. But I was determined, if I'm going to write this story, I just have to do this. I have, first of all, to see the camp. That takes at least a day. It's a massive place, and that's incredibly draining to look at the enormity of Auschwitz-Birkenau and everything that happened there. But I think that it was physically exhausting. I think that almost saved me in a way because I was not in shape. I said, "Wow, walking 30 kilometers a day, how hard can that be? You're walking, come on." And I was arrogantly unprepared for how exhausting it would be. And so I mostly was focusing on being in terrible pain as opposed to the emotional side of things, which I'm still processing, I think. So in a way, it kind of helped me because I would wake up those first couple of days. I can't remember. I haven't been that sore since like high school cross country. The first few days of practice in the fall, because the coach would always say, "No, don't forget to run over the summer." Sure, we'll run. And then you get back and he sends you on 7 miles the first day. And then I remember the next day literally having to pull myself up the staircase in high school because I couldn't move my legs. And so it kind of reminded me of that, which was definitely it was just all a part of what, like you said, it was an unforgettable experience.
Well, that's so admirable that you took that trip. And you've written so many influential and important nonfiction books, from Bomb to Fallout to Two Miserable Presidents and a lot more. How do you conduct research for your novels? Do you go online or search through books or kind of both?
Yeah, definitely both. I mean, the Poland trip is extreme. I've been on other trips I've been to Los Alamos, and I did a book called Lincoln's Grave Robbers. So I went to see where Lincoln was buried, things like that. Oh yeah, that's a cool one.
It's a great book.
It's so weird. But I can't always go everywhere. And so a lot of it is, I say this when I go to schools, and I mostly talk at middle schools, and I hope they believe me, is that my work is so similar to your work. It's just longer.
Yeah.
So I get an idea, and then I do what you would do. I go to the library, I get out a book, I do research, I take notes, I make an outline, first draft, revision. It's all exactly the same as what you guys are doing, and certainly what you will do as you get into high school and beyond. And the research is, sometimes people think there's some secret to it, or I go to some special writers only archive, and sometimes I'll go to specialized archives. Like for this escape story, a lot of the notes, Rudy Verba, the teenager I focus on, a lot of his papers wound up at the FDR library, which is in upstate New York. But anybody could go there. Maybe you wouldn't know to go, but once you know that it's there, you could make an appointment and go. And then it's just doing exactly what you already know how to do. You're reading and taking notes. And I call it kind of nerdy detective work, because that's what it is. You're looking like a detective for clues, not necessarily all the answers, but, oh, that's interesting. And then you try to find out a little more about that. And maybe that leads you to another clue and another clue. And so that's where the notes really come in, because, oh, this book only has one paragraph on, like, for instance, in Bomb, I was researching that book, just doing old-fashioned reading. And I was hundreds of pages into this book on the atomic bomb, and I came across a story of these Norwegian commandos who were trained in Great Britain and then parachuted back into occupied Norway and blew up stuff, factories the Germans were using to build their bombs or to do bomb research. And this was a major factor in the race to build the bomb. And yet Americans never learned that story, certainly not in a school class. Mm-hmm. And so when you come across a half a page on something, it's not enough. That's like a detective coming on oh, I got to talk to that guy. He might have something interesting to say. And so, of course, you can look in the back of a good nonfiction book, will have source notes, and you can see where they got it from. And it'll usually lead you back to a primary source, somebody who was there, wrote a memoir about it, or did an oral history interview about it. But these are things anybody can do. It's just a matter of doing the reading and then following the parts that are most interesting to you to get more information.
Well, I love that term, nerdy detective work. I'm gonna call everything that I do now. Mom, it's nerdy detective work.
Absolutely.
Let me do my nerdy detective work.
And I feel like being nerdy is cool in a way that it wasn't when I was a kid. I know it. I know that's true. And in those days, it was all, all about being an athlete and football player and all that. And I was proudly with my, my nerdy friends, doing our own thing. And we were fine with it, but it definitely wasn't cool. And I think things are coming around a little bit.
Definitely. And like the 80s sounds a lot like the Breakfast Club. Like you have the jocks, the athletes, and the basket cases, the nerds, but now I feel like when someone calls me a nerd, it's like, thank you. Now exactly. I'm gonna be an author. I'm gonna be an author like Steve Sheinkin.
I'm glad you said that. Did you know? I don't know. Have you ever read a book? This guy, an author named Tim Federle. He's probably best known for Better Nate Than Ever, which I think is top 5 best middle grade novels ever written. And he said, I just happened to watch him give a talk once, and he said to the kids, the things that make you weird in middle school are the things that will get you paid as an adult. And I said, that's it. Drop the mic. So,
that's awesome. And Tim is so right about that.
Yep.
And this is kind of a question for not one specific book, but kind of for all the ones they've written, from Lincoln's Grave Robbers to Fallout to Bomb. So, for instance, the Cold War was kind of a strategic battle between America and the Soviet Union, because, nobody was actually attacking each other's land. It was more like every piece, they were like chess pieces in the world, and we were like the 2 players. So I'm just curious, what kind of strategic battle, per se, did you find the most interesting and fun to write?
Oh, that's a good analogy. And chess is inevitable when you're talking about that. I think one of the tragic mistakes of the Cold War is that we, the U.S. and the Soviets, really did see the world as a chessboard, as a game board, and these countries, Korea, Vietnam, Iran, Cuba, it's almost like they're pieces on the board instead of human beings. And we treated them that way, and it was tragic. But there's no doubt that people saw it that way and fought the Cold War that way. So I even use a lot of chess analogies in the book Fallout, because it's inevitable. And people who were there did it all the time. And even at the time, the U.S. and the Soviet Union the Soviets dominated the world of high-level chess at that time. And I don't know if are you a chess player at all?
I am definitely a chess player.
Oh, me too. That's cool. See, that's cool now too. In a way that it never used to be. So, but in terms of the best, I love the Cold War. The Cold War I love it as a storyteller and a reader more than, it's my favorite thing to read. It is the golden age of spy stories. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why James Bond was invented and set in that era, because it's that spy versus spy, U.S. versus Soviet, highest stakes in the world, and spy stories just don't work nearly as well in any other time or place, I found. So naturally, I gravitate toward that, and that's what I thought about with Fallout. Is I thought I'm going to make it a spy. I'm going to write a spy thriller. It's kind of like a follow-up to Bomb. It has that same structure, set in the Cold War, and I'm going to draw inspiration from usually novels that I love to read, that are often set in that same time period, 50s, 60s. And so I love learning about real life spies, exciting things about their lives. There are boring things about their lives. But I opened that book Fallout with just a truly incredible real spy story, which is of a kid, not much older, 13, I think he was, so a little older than you, and doing a paper route, stumbling into a Russian spy ring in Brooklyn, New York, just doing his after school paper route. And some teachers paid him with coins, and when he dropped the coins in his hand, one of the nickels split open, and inside was a secret note from one Russian spy to another. He didn't know that, of course. He just thought, this is a strange coded note inside a hollow nickel. That's just so weird. It sounds like the beginning of a movie. And that's my idea of a perfect way to start a book. And to set the stage, I love to find opening scenes that let you know basically what you're in for. This is going to be this kind of story.
That was a brilliant and also extremely captivating way to start a book, especially one when there's a lot of spy stuff there. So,
oh, good. Yeah, I love all the spy gadgets and all that stuff. I love all that.
I also, some of the stories that you talked about, how they had to kind of keep their whole spy life a secret. I just find that extremely interesting. Also, like, how do they not let those sort of things slip, and what are the consequences? And your books really tackle everything when it comes to it, both sides of the Cold War, and also kind of the behind the scenes. Like, we see all the spy car chases, but there's a lot more to it. So, yeah.
That's good. I'm glad you're a fan of spy stories too. Yeah.
And my next question is, so this is it's the first book that you published. After hundreds of rejections, you wrote the Rabbi Harvey series, and now it's a PJ Arway book, graphic novel, and awesome. And on the sides, this is probably my favorite side spine ever. A graphic novel of dueling Jewish folktales in the Wild West.
Yeah.
That's just awesome. So,
that's cool.
What's the process like to get PJ Library or PJ Arway's hands on a story that you write?
That's going way back too, because going way back to that time when I was trying to write movies and do all that. I've always loved comics. I've always loved to draw. I consider myself a good, but not really good artist.
Yeah.
Like I could never have drawn Bomb, the graphic novel. I just couldn't do it. I don't have the chops to do something that complicated, but I can draw. I like to draw comics, and I've put lots of comics online over the years. And with Rabbi Harvey, it was that subtitle kind of captures it. I wanted to do Jewish folk tales, but set them in the Wild West. It's just, I don't know why. It seemed like a funny idea to me. And it's very typical of an American Jewish kid. You would grow up with both those sets of folklore, Jewish and American. And I guess subconsciously that's where it came from. But I always love Jewish folk tales. I love how the smart people outwit the bad guys using these mental tricks. And I thought that would be great to make it as a rabbi, but he's also a sheriff, only he doesn't use a gun like in a Western. He just uses his wit and wisdom to foil the bad guys and solve problems. And so that was many years in the making. I was not exaggerating, since hundreds of rejections, but that spread over many years. First of all, the idea is pretty weird.
Yeah.
To the mainstream, Jewish folk tales in the Wild West as a comic. And also you have to remember, this was, if we go back 20 years, graphic novels weren't nearly as big a thing in those days. So people would say, well, who is this for? Is it just for kids? Is it just for adults? We don't publish graphic novels. I got a lot of companies saying that we don't publish graphic novels. Nobody would say that now. Everybody wants to publish comics and graphic novels. But then it was considered almost like a joke. why would we want to do this? This is silly. We do serious books. And so it got rejections for all those reasons. It got rejections, honestly, because it wasn't good enough. And a lot of those rejections, I'm really glad that I got them, because that meant that after getting over the feeling of being rejected, which I always take very personally,
Yeah.
but which is, again, like I said, that's fine as long as you don't let it stop you. Then I said, all right, well, I guess I have to make it better then. And I'll send it, because I'm not giving up. I guess the only choice is to make it better and send it out again. And so I just did that over and over for many years and refined the best stories into the first book, which was called The Adventures of Rabbi Harvey. And that was published and did really well in that little world in publishing. It was sort of pigeonholed as a Jewish kids book. So as soon as you say that, you're pretty limited in the market. It's not a huge market. I really felt like it could have had a wider, and maybe still could have a wider appeal beyond that, because they're just funny stories with this Jewish wisdom and ethic that's pretty universal, really. And PJ, which is this great organization that sends Jewish books to kids, and they've expanded not just picture books, but doing middle grade books too. And so they found it and really liked it. It had existed for a long time, but I think that they were looking for books that could appeal to kids your age and maybe a little younger. And I said, wow, this is great, because it does exactly what we want. It's so obviously Jewish, and sometimes they have to push, the definition is sometimes hard to define. What makes a book Jewish? In this case, you don't have to worry. It's obviously about a Jewish character with these Jewish teachings in it. And so they liked that. And I think it became one of their most popular books. And I always intended, I did 3 of them, you have 2 there, and I always intended to just say, this will be my life. Now I'll just make more of this series. And I just got busy. It's a good thing. I mean, I got busy doing other things, and I haven't gone back to them. I always stay in my mind, of course it's not done. I'm going to go back and do more. So hopefully I will.
Well, I love the Rabbi Harvey series. It's certainly a great one. And
thank you.
My plan is so I have 2 of them. I know you have 3 in the series, so I really want to get that.
The first, you have the second and third one, I can see.
Oh, yeah.
They're just short, they're short stories, so you can read them in any order.
And PJ Library is awesome. That's just a little bit of,
totally awesome.
They have PJ Library, PJ Arway. They also have a publisher now, PJ Publishing. They have a lot, so.
Great.
And my next question is one that I ask every single person I interview. If you could be or meet any literary character, it could be your favorite author or your favorite character in any book, or maybe it could be someone who you featured in one of your own books. Who would it be and why?
Yeah, wow, that is a tough one. I've thought about that over the years, and probably the answer's changed a lot. On any given day, it might change again. But you said it. I'll come back to one of my own books. The first narrative nonfiction book that I wrote was about Benedict Arnold. It was called The Notorious Benedict Arnold, and he was famous for being a traitor in the American Revolution. I would say that name is synonymous with treason. I mean, people say that name when they want to give an example of a traitor, because he was that. But he was also this great American hero first. And I still think is probably, I was going to say it's my favorite story that I've written. That's so hard to say, because you can tell that I love to jump around into like different kinds of stories, but it's just nonstop, over the top action adventure, loose cannon action hero, kind of someone you'd see in a movie, but 200 years before movies were invented. And everybody has a different take on him. Some people even defend him. I don't do that, but I do think he's a complicated guy, and I would love to meet him. I'm not saying I would get along. I think he was a tough guy to get along with, very overbearing, arrogant, always look at me kind of a character. But I feel like I could get a better sense of him if I could just see him have dinner, with his wife or with some of the other soldiers, something like that. Just spend a day following him around. I just think that would be endlessly fascinating.
That would be extremely fascinating. And now I need to, whenever someone calls me a traitor, I'm gonna start saying, I'm not a Benedict Arnold. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and everybody, this is now the final question, and I'm very sad about that because it's been such a fun interview. So with the new year upon us, I'm asking everyone I interview in January, do you have any New Year's resolutions?
Oh yeah. Specifically, no. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll think of, I mean that in the sense that I didn't specifically sit down on the 31st, and say, here's what I'm going to do. And I have done that before, and it's been helpful at times, at other times I've totally ignored them. But, but I think about it abstractly and think, all right, it's kind of almost a time to refocus on what's important and what you want to do. And what I come back to is try, I guess I put it like this, try not to be too hard on myself.
Yeah.
I know myself much better now than I did when I was your age, obviously. And that's one of the good things about getting older, So you kind of learn your strengths and weaknesses. And what I try to tell myself, and this is in the form of sort of a resolution, is that you have to accept both at the same time. You can't say, well, it's great that I have this creativity and that I'm sensitive and all these things, but I wish it didn't come with this and this and this. You can't say it all comes together. So like I said, if I get a rejection, I get very upset about it, but that's part of it. If I try to write one day and it's frustrating and I don't get anything good done, I get really down about it and it affects me for the rest of the night and I'm in a lousy mood until I can get back to work the next day. And the next day is usually better. And so I've realized now, and I'll make this my official resolution since we're talking, that I should accept that,
Mm-hmm.
and not take it so hard and say, all right, that's just how you are. And you can't take that away without taking away the strengths of what makes me good at what I do. And that's just something that took me a long time to figure out. So I'm going to call that my resolution, is to be more accepting of not just the strengths, but the weaknesses on an everyday, a really practical everyday way.
That is such a great resolution. And everybody, my guest today has been the extraordinary Steve Sheinkin, and you all need to check out Author Fan Face Off, read his books. They're awesome. You'll learn a lot, and you're also going to be extremely entertained. Not only are his books just great, but they also make nonfiction and learning super duper fun. And Steve, thank you so much for joining me today. And also, I don't know if you can share this, but who is your next Author Fan Face-Off guest?
Oh, thank you, E-Train. Yeah, I don't think I know yet. I got the Bomb graphic novel that's going to be my focus for the next few weeks. It's coming out on the 24th, and then I'm going to do a couple weeks of events going around, not the whole country, but lots of different cities doing events. So I haven't booked any Author Fan Face-Offs until after that, and I'm not sure. I know we have a bunch of people write in and send us requests. Can I face off against? And it's often, like the Wimpy Kid or something that we may not realistically be able to make happen. But if you see this and you think you might want to be on the show, feel free to contact me with requests. Or if you think you have an author you'd love to see who we haven't featured already, let me know, because we're open for the second half of the school year. We'll be open to suggestions.
Woo. And everybody, if you are an author watching, I think you're gonna love Author Fan Face Off, and maybe one day you might be on there too.
One day, who knows?
So yeah, Steve, you are a book hero, and all of you watching and listening, read his books. They are truly epic. They're epic tales, and they're just amazing. I'm saying it a lot, but it's reigns true each time. And you can follow Steve on Twitter. It's at his name, at Steve Sheinkin.
Yeah.
And Author Fan Face Off on YouTube. The link is in the description. And you can also find all of his books. He talks about them on his website, and also Bomb graphic novel. Remember, coming out January 24th. I can't wait to read it, and I'm sure you will love it as well. And yeah, just keep on reading, everybody. Stay safe. Happy New Year. And yeah, read Steve's books.
Thank you.